This episode, I'm thrilled to introduce a very special guest who is not only a fellow expat, but also the host of the podcast Meet The Expat, where I had the honor to be interviewed just a few weeks ago. Born in France, she grew up as a third culture kid, experiencing life in Ireland, South Africa, and Japan. After working in Ireland for some time, she has now returned to her roots in France. Please join me in welcoming Pauline.
This is Expat Experts, the podcast that dives into the fascinating lives of those who've lived and worked across borders, exploring the challenges, experiences, and insights they've gained along the way.
Before we dive into today's episode, and as always, I want to remind you that the best way to stay updated with the latest content and episodes is by hitting the subscribe button in YouTube and also in your favorite audio platform. For more insights and exclusive one-on-one calls on how to create your own podcast, YouTube channel, or navigating your life as an expat, please visit the website expatexpertspodcast.com or check the link in the description.
The Expat, Pauline from Meet The Expats Podcast.
Again, thanks for accepting and for being not only a guest today, but also the host a couple of weeks ago. It was very, very nice to be for once in the other side of the...
On the other side, yeah. It's a different experience for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, a little bit like maybe we could start from the very beginning. Like you're originally from France, but you moved pretty young, or when was the first move?
So I was 2 years old. So indeed, I was born in France. My parents are French. All my family is French and lives in France. Okay. But my father became an expat. He had moved previously abroad to Japan, actually, through this program that allowed him to work in his company in Japan, but also take classes. I think he really loved it. He loved the country. And when both my parents moved back to France, I was born, and a couple of years in, he got an opportunity to move abroad, to move to Dublin. So that was the first move, 2 years old. I don't remember it, obviously. Don't have many memories, but I do know about the whole growing up there. That is definitely some core and strong memories for me. We stayed 7 years, so I was there from the age of 2 to 9. So really all of my childhood was there. And my parents made this choice to put me in an English school straight away, Irish school, actually. They looked at the French school. There is a French school in Dublin, but they considered it didn't have such a good reputation versus maybe the one in London or in other countries, other cities. So they went with this choice, which is amazing for me today because I'm bilingual, fluent English. I don't have to think about it. So great start in life on that side. And I always spoke French at home. So I was really learning the two languages at the same time, French and English at school, French at home. Then we followed through the different countries. When my parents were moving, I followed as we went on until I was old enough to make my own decisions and sort of leave home when I was 18 to pursue my own studies and my own direction and my own travels.
Nice.
Quick introduction.
Very cool. Well, that's very interesting. Like the fact that your parents, I mean, when you're 2, it's a very good age yet because you haven't gone to school, no? I suppose yet. At that point of time,
it's the first. Yeah,
they could do the decision of like, okay, we go directly with the system of Ireland at that kind of time. So for you, very good because you got 2 languages straightforward directly from the very beginning. How was it though for you, like growing up as a child? I suppose for you it's not that much of a shock but you will still feel different than the other kids, or like in that sense, like.
I think I would see a little bit when I would go to my friend's house. At school, I wouldn't know there was a difference because I had no comparison, obviously. Food, I'd say, was a bit of a differentiator of, for example, the lunch boxes, where I didn't have the same things as the kids, as the Irish kids in the lunchbox. That was where there was a little bit of a difference, and then it was more of the habits when you'd go on a play date to a friend, and they'd have like a savory snack or maybe a chip sandwich. That was sort of the big trend of you have crisps in the middle of two slices of bread, and I was like, what is this? I don't have this at home. This is not a thing for me. So that's where I think I'd see the main differences of I'm the foreign girl here.
Yeah.
When you'd compare lunchboxes or you'd compare snacks going to a friend's house, and maybe even just like the dinner times and things like that. If you go to friends' places, they have what they call tea time or supper around 6 p.m. I'm in a French family, and I be more around 7 or 8 p.m. Even as a younger child, maybe 7 p.m. So everything was a bit in a different time zone, maybe, and different culture in terms of the culinary side, mainly, I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose because your parents both are French, you said?
Both are French. And
so you were born and raised in a French environment at the end at home. It was like still like cooking French dishes and not doing cheap sandwiches. That sounds, I don't know if tasty or disgusting at the same time. I'm a bit...
it's crispy.
That's for sure. And then you moved with so you spent your primary school, let's say like this, like 9,
yes,
a little bit earlier than high school, I would say. No, like high school it's around 12, depending on the systems. But you moved before that, and then you went to Japan. That was the second.
No, to South Africa.
South Africa. Okay.
From there, we moved to South Africa. Again, my father, with his company, got this opportunity abroad, and so they had to tell me about this move, which was a bit of a serious conversation, which I don't think I quite understood the why, the how. I remember myself being extremely sad of having to leave my whole life, the friends, and I mean, this was the 90s, so we didn't have internet. So you'd have to do, a call abroad, which costs a fortune, or write letters, or I think we started fax at some point. So that was the only way to communicate, with my friends left after. It was sending these written letters that would take weeks to arrive, or maybe sending a fax once in a while here or there. So it was a big shift, and it was the complete unknown for me. I think when they said South Africa, I would honestly picture a savannah and lions roaming around. I had no clue what my life was going to look like, but nothing close to what it actually was, at least.
It's still a mind of a 9-year-old kid. Like, it's normal. No, what do you are not an expert on geography at 9 years old.
No, and we're not exposed at the time. We don't have internet yet. So we're not exposed to, like, you can go do a quick research, see the pictures, and that's it. You only see maybe the magazines who show you like the touristy things, like the safaris, but not the real life there.
Crazy. I assume that was one of the difficult parts for you, like as a kid and as a underage in general. Also, I don't know, when you moved to Japan back then, how many years did you live in South Africa?
So in South Africa, I stayed for 4.5 years.
So you were still pretty young when you moved to Japan.
I was pretty young.
It happened the same emotionally, like I'm having friends and then I need to leave them again, because this is a quite typical expat thing also. Like,
yes, of course I was sad, but it's funny, leaving South Africa, I don't think it felt as hard.
Okay.
I think, to put it back into context, in South Africa, I was at the French school this time, so that was my first shift. But it was a French school with 90 different nationalities. It was full of expats of kids whose parents were diplomats or expats like myself, or even some who were half South African, half French or Belgium or whatever. So it's extremely international. And constantly you had people leaving or coming in. So you were exposed to people leaving regularly already, and you knew you weren't here forever. I think that was the first time where I knew we're not here for good. Versus Ireland, for me, it's just like, that's where I grew up. So I never in my mind, I thought we'd leave at some point. South Africa, it's sort of, I don't think it was even said or that we had the conversation previously, but it sort of felt like we know this is just a stage of life. Don't know how long, but it's just a stage of life. And you're in this international school with kids who are used to moving every 2 years, where suddenly you make friends very quickly. First of all, you're a kid, so everything goes much faster than as an adult. But I think they're all in this mindset of, we know we're not here for long, so we're just gonna make friends now. We're gonna like go to each other's houses after 2 days in school, and that's it, and go on trips together with the parents and everything. So that was very intense in a good way. But then leaving didn't feel as hard, I feel, because so many people had left already before, and it was just a normal thing that would happen.
I see. So what about the life in there? Like, was it really different? Like, what shocked you the most coming from Ireland to South Africa? Because they are very different cultures.
Yeah,
no?
they're like, very, very different. The whole way of life is different. I mean, the weather obviously is great. Suddenly, leaving from Ireland, suddenly everything's sunny and warm.
Maybe that's more a problem of Ireland than it is this.
But also you're in this expat bubble of everyone has a big house and help. So you have a maid, you have a gardener, everyone has a pool, a jacuzzi room. So you're going to suddenly this life that is completely different, where you have a lot more comfort and advantages than you would have in a European country classically. So it's very surprising at first. And then it's also, I mean, there's security issues there. This was a couple of years just after apartheid, so there was also this context that was there. I was young, so I didn't see everything, and I think taking a step back later, I realized a couple of scenes like, oh, okay, this wasn't normal. But so there is a security issue. Clearly, you're not walking alone on the street. Like, that doesn't happen. And it's not really a walking city either, so everyone's in a car, but the cars lock automatically. There are spikes on the walls surrounding each houses or electric fences. There are bars on the windows, and there are panic buttons in every single room of the house. So that's something that you have to live with. Then you choose to be very stressed, or you just live with it and continue living. But there are a couple of rules that you are told, and you have to learn when you arrive, clearly. And I was at an age where I didn't need my independence, which was great. I think had I been a teenager, it would have been very, very different. Difficult, and probably much harder. Where my parents told me when they'd go out for dinners with friends, sometimes the other parents would leave at 4 a.m. to go pick up their kids at the exit of the club, because there was no way they were going to spend 5 minutes alone at 4 a.m. outside. So it's adapting on that way. Yeah. When you're younger and you don't need to hang outside alone or other, it's fine. But it also means that you're constantly at a friend's house here and there. That's how you meet your friends, which is nice.
It's funny because as I told you, like, just we were talking before the recording, and I interviewed like a couple of episodes ago woman who moved to South Africa also. She did the opposite of you, actually. She started through Japan and then went to South Africa. So it's just like
so she saw the very, very safe side before the opposite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, she went the other way, and she was explaining a little bit like the same with the case of her daughter being a teenager at that point of time, and how difficult it was for the daughter. Yeah.
Big challenge and struggle to deal with.
She was saying
the freedom.
She was telling the same, like these courses on how to get security, like that they teach you when you arrive to your condo, and they like you live in these houses that are like
it's a gated house. Yeah,
that's exactly. So yeah, it resonates. I heard this story before, but I suppose I don't know how much of it did you really realize being 9 years old.
I mean, people did try to break into the house quite early on, so
okay,
you realize quite soon, and you realize quite soon. And there are a couple of things where, my parents took self-defense classes, and they explained that indeed why the car locks straight away, or that we have to be careful if we're stuck at a red light, if we feel that we're followed, we just have to go through. And you hear these stories about carjackings and hijackings. Luckily, nothing ever happened to us, but so some relatives did, so some friends of theirs were hijacked, and they tell you how to react. And so it's part of the thing. When we arrive, they explained to me, like, in case this happens, this is how you have to react, because you have to be ready. You never know.
So they also teach kids how to react in this. Of course, I mean, I assume that.
I mean, if someone hijacks the car and the kid is at the back, you don't want something to happen to them either.
Yeah,
so,
well, it's I don't know. It's a whole world. I mean, I moved countries, but I've never been into a place that is dangerous in that sense. So it's like.
So. Yeah, you do realize things, but people are nice, and you can still live. You just have to be conscious. I mean, you can choose to be completely paranoid and scared and not leave your house, or you can still live and do things. And I think that's what my parents tried to do, and I never felt unsafe. No.
Makes sense.
Part of the package was we get a dog, and you get a guard dog.
That was the package for you, eh? I see.
Yeah, so the choice was between maybe a Rottweiler and a German Shepherd. We got the German Shepherd.
Nice. Did you know, like, did your parents know that it was only for 4 years? So it was an end date? It was something that they already knew that it was going to end at some point?
I think they knew it was around 3 years. Then we never have the exact end date. I mean, Ireland was supposed to be 3 to 4 years. It lasted 7. So I've always heard my mom say, we know when we leave, we never know when we're coming back, because dates change, deadlines change.
Yeah.
If there's a new project, if there's no new opportunity, if there's a new opportunity that turns up, you never know what can happen.
When then you moved to Japan with 13?
So no, actually we moved back to France in between.
Okay.
Stayed again 4.5 years or so. So this was actually the hardest move for me, starting to be in the teen years. We moved halfway through the school year, so right in the middle. And to the small town Angoulême, close to Bordeaux. But it's a small town where, I mean, the kids in my class probably had known each other for 10 years. You see what I mean? So yeah, you're arriving in the middle of the school year, you're changing hemispheres. So I left summer to arrive in the dead winter. So it's all tanned and everything. No one understood how that was possible. And coming from an extremely international school where everyone spoke, French, English, whatever, everyone was mixing languages in the same conversation, to, yes, a French school, more traditional with the times also. Although South Africa was a French school, they sort of adapted to the weather. So you'd start early, but you'd finish school very early. You'd have a very small lunch break. And then whole week, I think I probably had activities every day of the week or something after school. In France, I mean, you start at 8 and you finish at 5:30. You're exhausted. You only have your Wednesday afternoon off, and so that's when kids do activities. So it's different rhythm, trying to fit into this new atmosphere where you don't have the same mindset, you don't know the same trends. And I think it's also an age where you're trying to discover yourself, know exactly who you are, what you like. We're a little bit mean between each other at that age. It's definitely a hard age where any little thing where you stand out is, I'm not going to say bully because it was not bullying, but it's you're being pointed out because you don't understand this, or you don't know this, or you don't have that trend, or whatever. And so small things like the fashion, the music, things like that, I was completely outside of the loop. I didn't know. It's very, very different. And so that took a lot of adjusting. I'd say a good year and a half before I was really able to gain trust, feel good also myself, and actually understand who my friends were and who to hang out with.
Yeah,
because the friend groups are already made also when you arrive halfway through the year.
Absolutely. And not only that, if you go to a small town from a big city, then at the end you're entering like groups that are for a long time very bubble, no, like they are their group. Exactly. And then you're trying to enter into that thingy without who are you and what are you doing here? Why did you live in South Africa? I don't know. I suppose these questions were like, what?
Yeah, but that was still okay. Why did you live in South Africa? But it's funny because there was a sort of, I can't blame them for it, but there was a sort of ignorance sometimes. And I was like, well, why are you asking that question of, what country in South Africa? Well, South Africa is a country. And are you not too tired about the time zone? And it was innocent from them, but I didn't understand why these questions were coming, because it was so obvious for me it's actually the same time zone. Right? It's like 1 hour difference, and that's it. But I get it that it was new for them also.
Makes sense. So if that was the case, the first repatriation, we will talk a little bit more about it.
That was the first repatriation, probably the hardest.
We will talk on the second part about it a little bit more, and the whole processes of coming back home. I think it's a very regular topic on expats that I talk, that they went back home. I don't know. In your case, you were very, very young when you left France. So were you even like feeling that you were going back home, or you were considering Ireland more like the place to be? I don't know.
I don't know if I ever said, oh, this is going back home when going back to France. Maybe a little bit, although I had never lived there. The thing is, I knew the town because all my mother's family comes from there and lives there. So there was family, which I think made it easier, at least on weekends. I was surrounded by family, even though they probably had no understanding of what I was going through because they never left the city. But that probably made it feel a little bit more like home. And I don't think we made the move with this thing of it's just a passing through, like there was for South Africa, where we knew it's not going to last forever. I can't remember, but I don't think there was that thing of this is just temporary. So it probably did feel a little bit like, well, this is going to be the new home. I don't know if I could say I'm going back, but I'm moving to France at least, and this is going to be home. Family is there, so who knows?
Yeah. It was more like, okay, for your parents also, I suppose, no? Going okay, now we've lived multiple years outside and now it's going back to family and this kind of stuff.
Well, it was actually, it wasn't planned because it was again for my father's work. My mom had stopped working with the different moves, and his family doesn't come from there. His family is from the southeast. And it's just that the company he was in has a branch in that specific city. So it wasn't my mom saying, "Oh, I want to be
Convenient.
close to the family." It was just convenient and a bit of a surprise, especially to be in such a small city after having done only capitals and bigger
Can
cities.
imagine like doing very, very big cities and suddenly being in a small town. It's always a shock. Sometimes it's a good thing. It's also finding a calmer life or like a more real life. When does Japan comes in this? It comes the same way, like your dad has an offer and then you leave to Japan?
Exactly. That's it.
Pattern.
Repeated pattern, definitely. It's, here we go again. The difference this time is I was a little bit older. I was 16 or 17 when it came up. And so I was towards the end of high school. And so my parents actually gave me the choice of what do you want to do? Do you want to come with us or do you want to stay and finish high school? Because there was only 1 year left. And so it was my graduation year with baccalaureate, which is the French final exam. There were arrangements that were possible with friends for me to stay if it was something I wanted. I decided to go. It's once in a lifetime opportunity, I thought to myself. So my father left earlier and he left throughout the school year. And I stayed in Angoulême another 6 months with my mom. So finished the school year this time. Because it was a bit more of a strategic year with exams still. Instead, we made the move. And this time we made the move where I knew I was only going for 1 year.
Okay.
That was the first sort of shift of changing. It's like in my mind, I'm just doing my baccalaureate, my last year, and then I'm going back to France for my studies because I'm in a French school. And so I went to the French school in Japan, French high school, very good high school, very small, especially for the last final years where I think a lot of the students have maybe left or like myself are not necessarily following their parents for that last 2 years. So we were only 8 students per class on that final year to give you the scope of it, of how small in the final years it was. So it's quite intense, different rhythm of high school again versus what I was dealing with in France with exams every Saturday morning. So short weekends, a lot of work. So it was a lot of catching up for me. And suddenly having, to commute and doing transport to get to the school because the size of the city is so much different. And, in Angoulême, small town, I would either take the bus, it was maybe like 25 minutes, or my mom would drive me to school and that was like 15, 20 minutes max. Now suddenly, you're commuting with the metros, which works amazing, but it's more of a 35 to 45 minute ride, a little bit different. There's a new rhythm. There's a lot of catching up in terms of level to get there. And the students there were either French and they had been there for, again, a couple of years already. No one was arriving just for the final year. Was probably the only one. Or they were half French, half Japanese, or half French, half Korean. Generally. So again, it was a little bit of fitting in because they'd known each other for maybe 2 to 5 years, depending. And also I was only there, school year is probably 8 to 9 months only. So it was very short, I think. And we had fun. We made a space, but I blended in, but we didn't keep really contact versus other places where maybe we kept contact a little bit longer after.
Which city in Japan were you?
Tokyo.
Nice.
Yeah.
I suppose it was also a cultural shock, I assume. Like, even if you were in a French school, the French system works like that. So you can go outside, and if you're in a French school, you don't need to repeat courses or you need to convalidate? Or how does it work exam-wise?
I mean, if it's a French school, it's the same French system. So... you have the same grades, like you're graded on the same things and same level. It's a French academy.
So you accumulated the notes or the badges from South Africa to Japan at the end, no? Like
yes.
You've been in a French
I've been in a French system for most of
in 3 different countries. That's also very,
Yes.
it's nice.
I've seen different ways of, teaching. They have the same structure, obviously, in the same courses, but there's a little bit of localization for some options. Music in South Africa was way more fun. I think I've never met another music teacher that was as good as fun. He'd teach us djembe, or he'd make us build our own flute, and we'd work on South African rhythms and songs and national anthems and things like that. And national anthem is not in English, in South Africa. It's I can't remember the language actually of it, but they have 11 national languages.
Okay. Language-wise, did you learn any of the languages of
South Africa was English. Mainly, I didn't learn Afrikaans, but they didn't really teach it in school either. In Japan, I wanted to take Japanese third language, but that program started 2 years before my arrival. Like, you'd start 2 levels before, so I couldn't take it because I wouldn't have the level, and I think I had other things to catch up on that were more prioritized.
Yeah, if it's only 8 months, exactly. I don't know if you learn much.
And you have your final exam, which is the big thing.
Can imagine. So, you need to focus a little bit on 2 priorities, I suppose.
So no extra languages than English.
What about the culture itself? Like, did you immerse? Of course, you were in school with French people, but would you say that you really lived the Japanese culture at some point?
I definitely enjoyed the city. I wouldn't say I really immersed myself because being in a French family at home and a French school, I wasn't exposed that much. Plus, I didn't speak the language, which is a big thing in Japan. I think I did get a little bit of some of the codes of, there's a lot of hierarchy is very valued, respect. There are a lot of small things in society that you have to know, like blowing your nose is considered unpolite. They'd rather you sniff it all up very loudly than you blow your nose, and some things like that.
Okay, well, that's a weird example, but yeah, I suppose this is the small things that you don't even consider when you move to a place, and then suddenly you are in a completely different way of doing things. No, like. So
I think working in Japan is probably very, very different and much more structured. And I think my father had a bit more experience on that side, and saw it. But small things like he told me about going to a wedding in Japan, where there's so many codes of the colors you can wear, not wear. Even when you give a gift, you usually give a gift you give cash. It has to be in an envelope. You choose the color of the envelope. The banknotes have to be new.
Whoa.
You're not going to pull out a random banknote that's been folded 5 times. There's an order. Well, not really an order, but you have to put them in a certain way, facing this way inside the envelope, fold the envelope this way, hand it over in a certain way, so that you're not going against a certain traditional.
Nice. It's one of the cultures with more traditions, ancient traditions and preservation, and they really live out of it. Like, everyone has traditions, but it's true that the Japanese culture is known to have a lot of codes. So you finished then the studies there, you did your exams to enter university, and then you went back to study in France, you said?
Exactly. I moved back to France on my own. Well, my mom helped me for the move. And my parents stayed in Japan another 2 to 3 years, I think. So, yeah, when I left house, I left
for real.
Yeah. I was 18, and yes, I moved to France, to Paris. So first time living in Paris, living alone. To start prep school. Prep school in France is 2 years of intense. It's like an intense high school on a couple of subjects, and allows you to prepare for exams where there's only a number of spots available to get into the schools, like business schools or engineering school. So I followed the path for business school. So it was an exciting time, definitely, when you're 18 to 20 in Paris, living the life. But it was an intense 2 years, and I think it was harder than I thought, looking back after, just because, yes, it was one very, very intense in terms of school. I mean, it's known to be harsh and breaks a lot of people. And having that distance with my parents, I think I hadn't quite realized how difficult of suddenly you go from living with them to you see them once a year, which is very different. And there's such a time zone difference that we had to plan our calls. Like, you're not calling at any time of the day. Plus, it was still Skype with credits. I didn't have WhatsApp yet.
Yeah, the lovely Skype. I forgot about Skype.
Yeah. Works like a charm.
Yes, definitely. Best video quality ever.
So, I was planning that weekly call at a specific time, evening for them, morning for me, and trying to catch up and pack up your whole week in this small call. I think emotionally was quite hard and intense. Plus, I didn't have family in Paris. I did have family still in Angoulême, so I would go once in a while, but I wouldn't go that often either. Because train tickets in France are not that cheap. And it was also logistics, and I had to study a lot on weekends also. And so I'd study, I'd go out a little bit, also take the pressure off. But luckily I had a lot of friends from both Angoulême, the city in France where I had lived, but also from Tokyo. A lot of the students in Tokyo with me also moved to Paris to study after. So there was that friendship support system between, you're a student, so you meet a lot of people in your school, in your university you hang out with. And I had also the people from high school, the previous high schools I used to hang out with.
Nice. It's also cool that you have someone who is passing through the same thing as you, because if the people who were coming from Japan, probably their parents also stayed in Japan, they were a little bit of being in the same situation always unite people, no? A little bit more. When does then Ireland come on this? You study the whole you do business school, you do university, and then when do you move to Ireland?
Yeah, so I moved much later on. So I moved to Poitiers for my studies. I did my business school, a little bit of Erasmus, internship abroad, and then I just moved back to Paris for my final internship. I started working there a couple of years. I was in sales, and I was trying to change jobs, but I was looking in Paris. I was just fed up. I needed a change, and nothing was picking up. All the HRs were calling me to do exactly the same thing that I was doing, and no, I wanted to move more into the tech space, into marketing. And I met this girl who was living in Dublin and working at IBM. So I just picked up and saying, "Oh, IBM has jobs. I hadn't thought of that company. I'll take a look." And one of the jobs was, I looked at the Paris section, and one of the jobs, when I opened, said, "Well, this is actually based in Dublin." I was like, you know what? I'll apply, see what happens. And it's the only one that went through. So suddenly I'm going to move back 20 years later. And I had Parisian friends who had actually moved maybe a year or two previously in Dublin to work in tech, because it's the biggest tech bubble in Europe.
Nice. So suddenly you are going back. This is really weird. Going back home from home. It's this whole situation of you repatriated from Japan to France to repatriate yourself to what you also consider
starting
home
the
at some
loophole
point? Like, are you planning to go to South Africa anytime soon? Like, just like circling back again and again.
So it was pretty unplanned. And I think what got me to apply was saying, well, you know what, I know Dublin, it's not far, and I have friends there, so why not? But so you say it's like going back home. I never in my mind thought it's home. For me, I had settled in Paris. I had bought my flat. I had a little bit of an itch of sort of want to go back abroad and, you know, go alone, not through university, not through my parents, but also prove to myself, I can do it. I can do it on myself, on my own. So it came up a little bit out of the blue, and I caught the opportunity, but I left saying it's going to be 2 years. I didn't see myself settling. Okay. I think I also left. I was in a relationship and we did long distance for a little while until it just fizzled out because I had no exact return date. But yeah, it was more of, there's going to be a good, you know, career boost, a charm, and a fun experience, and I'll go abroad for a little bit and then come back.
Yeah, I know that I did that actually. I went to Germany with a job under the arm, let's say like this. It makes things a little bit easier also because, you know, you're having a job. So that's one of the biggest fears when you move abroad without having a job.
I moved for the job.
Did you keep contact with anyone from Ireland from when you were a kid in Ireland?
So the first few years when I left Ireland, I stayed in contact with a good friend. The first few years, she'd come over to France when I was on holidays there. I'd go back in the summer, and we got back in touch when I moved back. But it didn't really pick up that much. I think we probably met 2-3 times, and then just didn't. I think it had been too long, and we sort of went separate ways, and that's okay. So not really.
Well, it's a long shot. Like if you maintain a relation over 20 years and you still like each other, that's okay. With the distance and everything, that will be a coincidence more than a thing like that. So how many years did you stay at the end in Ireland then? Like.
It was 4 to 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, almost 5 years.
Nice. Again. And then you went back to France again.
I went back to France indeed. That was my plan, and it happened. It happened very abruptly and surprisingly with COVID.
Of course.
Yes.
The big star.
The big star. But I sort of see it as a silver lining. So I loved my experience there. Dublin is full of expats. It's an international bubble now versus 20 years ago. It doesn't compare because there's all the Google, LinkedIn, Twitter. Every American tech corp has their European headquarters there, and they hire Italians for the Italian market, French for the French market, German, whatever. So it's extremely European in every single tech company. Everyone's between, 25 to 35. It's a very young vibe. You start in a company, it's sort of, that onboarding promo. So IBM, I think we were 20 starting the same day, and everyone's come from abroad. So everyone's looking for an apartment at the same time. Everyone's trying to discover the country, the city. So there's this whole phase of coming in where you're with friends and it feels like paid Erasmus. Really.
Yeah.
Because everyone's going through the same thing. Everyone wants to go out. Everyone wants to try a new thing. Everyone wants to go on a weekend. So very quickly you're making connections with your colleagues, at least at IBM, but I think in different companies it's more or less the same, maybe not as big promotions, but still there is this vibe that you find in all the tech companies there, it's great. So if you want to just hang out with French, you can. or you can hang out with other countries, and everyone ends up, knowing each other from the different communities in different companies. Everyone refers each other to the different companies to get a job after. The only thing is, Dublin is extremely expensive as a city. It's crazy. Housing crisis, wild. It's still gotten worse over the years. So you're in a house share constantly, unless you're able to buy at some point, and the housing market is complicated. And so, after a couple of years, I used to own my own flat. I owned my flat in Paris.
Okay.
After 4 years of house sharing, I was starting to say that this cannot be my life. And also, in terms of culture, I was sort of feeling I was lacking a little bit in Ireland. It's all fun and all, but at some point I want to do other things than just going to a pub. So I couldn't really see myself staying. Some people were starting to leave. And in my mind also, it was after a good 2.5 years, I think, in my mind, it was constantly, I'm going to leave in 6 months. I'm going to leave in 6 months. I'm going to find a job. And I wasn't finding jobs to move back. So that was sort of blocking me. And I loved my job there. Really loved the company and what I was doing. COVID started, so we started being remote work. I asked my manager if I could go back to France until things died down a little bit. He's like, yeah, fine. So I left, with my hand luggage, laptop, and it's like, bye, I'll see you in 2 months.
Yes, sure.
2 weeks later, I was laid off. So
really?
No.
Wow. Okay.
There was extreme layoffs within my company. I was part of them. I mean, I was working in events, so obviously events were cut off. That was among the first budgets. And that's when I decided, well, you know what? I wanted to move back. That's it. But so it was very traumatic in the sense that in 24 hours, I had suddenly stopped my expat life. I was already in France, and I knew I wasn't going back. I couldn't say goodbye to my colleagues. I couldn't say goodbye to my friends because we were all in lockdown. This is like March 30th, so it was early in the COVID. I think in France we were locked down for 2 weeks only at that time. And so I started organizing my move, but from a distance. I couldn't fly back because I think there was a quarantine or something that was imposed of like 2 weeks if you flew back in. It was a bit ridiculous to fly back for 2 weeks when you only needed maybe 2 days for a move and things. So my good friends that were there, I sent them to my house share. I sent over suitcases by post or send my bag or something, empty suitcases, and they packed all my things through a WhatsApp video.
Oh, shit.
My 4 years of life, they were going through all my drawers and did all my boxes for me, and I was, well, throw that away, keep that, box this, take that with you if you want. Planned to send my bag. They labeled everything and sent over my things to leave my apartment. So yeah, hard, traumatic, definitely, of waking up in lockdown, of there's no expat life, there's no job, like what am I going to do when I'm moving back? And I know reverse culture shock is going to hit me hard at some point. So it was a bit of if you want to talk about repatriation, it was a little bit of a specific repatriation because it came very abruptly, and also it was at the same time, in a good way, I was back in France and with family when all of this happened. So I was in a good, surrounding with a support system at least, and more of a comfortable house. I was not cooped up in a tiny Parisian flat, which was better. But so a little bit of, thinking, what am I going to do with my life? To find a job, what am I going to do? And this is how the podcast popped up of I want to do something. a COVID baby again. And so how do I stay connected to the international life that I've just left? And that, I mean, I wanted to go back, but not under these conditions, or wanted to plan it a bit more. And so very quickly it was, well, interviewing expats that came up, and it was a little bit of a therapy for me, let's be very honest. It was more of,
Makes sense.
Seeing that other people, had lived the same challenges, went through the same highs and lows, and a little bit of the being connected to that mindset and the same people.
Yeah. Cool. So maybe we're already in the topic, so maybe we just jump directly into the second part, and we talk a little bit more deeper about repatriation and what meant for you, and maybe also like a little bit of your experience, but also how to deal with it. Yeah.
Hey there, everyone. If you're loving this episode so far and you want to stay tuned with other expat experiences, make sure to hit the subscribe button and follow our podcast so you never miss an episode. On top of that, we are now offering one-on-one calls to help you kickstart your own YouTube channel, launch a podcast, or navigate the journey of becoming an expat. Whether you are dreaming of sharing your story with the world or just need some guidance on your expat adventure, we've got you covered. Check the product section on our website, expatexpertspodcast.com, or check the link in the description and book your session today. With that said, let's go back to the episode.
The Expert, how to deal with repatriation.
Repatriated multiple times. There is no better person to talk with, I would say, about it. But what does mean repatriation for you? Like, it's always been like going back to France, or it's also like what you were saying, the feeling of like reverse culture shock, for example. It's a very typical thing to feel, no?
Yeah. I mean, repatriation for me is going, like, if I take a strict definition, I'd see it as going back home. And for me, that means going back to France. More Paris, because that's where as an adult, that's where I've lived the most and really made a home, and where I see myself living. And I think reverse culture shock always comes in. I think repatriation is a thing where I've gone through a couple, so I know what to expect. I think there's different stages to it, and I'll go through them. But I very naively, the last time, I thought that as I knew what to expect, it wouldn't happen. That was very naive. I thought I was ready because I knew. But no, it still hits you at some point, and you never know when, but I think it always comes. And it's hard feelings to explain, but there's this piece of whenever you move to a place, you become part of that place, or part of it comes into you, and you always leave with it. I mean, it might be just some habits, the people, the culture, the vibe. There's something there that you adjust to, and you make it your home in a way. And so you're leaving that. So you're leaving a home. There's this detachment, and that it's going to be an empty spot when you go back, when you repatriate. You can't just leave everything. And it's the same thing when you leave your home to go somewhere. You feel nostalgic. You've left something. You're missing out. And you have exactly that on the other way. Even though I wanted to go back, I mean, there's things I loved there. There was people, there was going to the beach. Weather wasn't great, but you live by the sea. There was this atmosphere of work where it was very international. And coming back, I knew, well, it's going to be France. Paris is not necessarily known for its international vibe at work, at least, or diversity. Things have changed. Very much surprised in a good way, about Paris in the past 10 years. Before I left and when I came back. So that's one aspect of, you feel like you're missing out on what's happening back in your own home. And then you come back thinking, oh, everyone's going to be so happy for me to see me, and we're going to pick things up. And yeah, people are happy to see you, but there's still living their life. You think you're sort of going to be the star for a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Of yay, I'm back, welcome back. There's going to be a party waiting. No. No, unless you go pick your phone, call them, and arrange for everything, it's not gonna happen. I think that's hard. It's hard on the ego of, you're happy to see them. You think, oh, I've missed them, and I'm gonna go back to, we're gonna have our rituals of, having coffee, I don't know, going out for dinner, whatever. But you haven't been there for X many of years, so they've just made their new rituals or different ones, and they've made them without you. And so you have to sort of make a statement to get back in, and also find a sync where both of you have evolved, or maybe expecting different things, have lived different things where you weren't there for each other necessarily. And it's, how do you make things work again and adjust? And I think this can be different at different stages of life. I mean, when I moved back to Paris after Tokyo, I was a student. I think it was very different. You make friends very, very quickly, and everyone's a little bit in that mood of going out. Coming back in my 30s, I came back, everyone was getting married or having children. So suddenly you're coming back, you're the girl that was living her, paid Erasmus, you're in a completely different way of life. So that the different stages of life, you're going to have different reverse culture shock, I think.
Definitely, of course.
But there's always going to be that thing of, finding the new balance, and also finding that mindset. You were people who were living the same things as you, who were going through the same challenges. And when you come back, they haven't gone through the same things. And for them, it's a little bit of, well, you're back. You wanted to be back. But they don't understand that you've left something and that you might be missing also something else.
You said also something very interesting, and it's that when you are outside for some years, you've lived for some years, things change. And a lot of people expect to everything be
to
how
be the
they
same.
lived it, no? And it's not, it's never like this, because not even the city you said about Paris, for example, it changed. So, but also the people. Have it happened to you that someone who was like close to you or a friend of yours, and it passes the years, and when you come back, you are like, okay, we don't have anything in common again now anymore, and then you lose a friendship because of this, for example?
I don't know if I have a real. I think probably. I mean, I think it's just that the friendship changes. Well, yeah, I wouldn't say I lost a friend, but it's just, I think we don't have necessarily the same connection, and we're not expecting the same things. And I think you have to be willing to accept that. You might still be there for each other, but maybe not for the same things, and maybe with a different degree, and you won't be there for the same things as it was as previously.
Yeah. Makes sense. It's a lot also of meeting new people involved in it, or like, have you passed through a way of like, okay, saying, okay, relations are not as it was anymore, I need to get new people around?
Yeah, build a new relation, build a new circle. Yes, completely, especially coming back this time. And I think that was a big focus for me, specifically when you're an adult and you're in the workplace, where you're at an age where it's harder to make friends. You don't meet as many people as you would when you're a student or when you're a kid. And it takes longer to build relationships because people are busy. They're working, they maybe have a family. And so it's, how do you make new friends and go find those people that you want to be connected with, that are maybe more international, or who have lived abroad and will be in the same type of mindset. And so I think I was a bit more prepared and worked a lot more on this. Not immediately, because obviously there was COVID, and it took me a year of actually finding a job and really making the move back to Paris. And so then you start building. So everything was a bit more spread out because the context was so peculiar. But things I have done and that I still work on. Like, it's a constant thing, I think, for me now. And for example, I joined a company that's French, but very international. So there were foreigners, there were expats from Sweden, America, in my company. That was one thing. At some point, I spent a couple of months in a co-living, and that was a good way to meet people that were working, that were in the same age bracket. A lot of them were internationals, and I maybe didn't make that many connections, but I made one or two that were really meaningful, and that we really built on that relationship and became friends and went out to, we explored the whole city in terms of concerts or restaurants, and
that's what
that
counts.
Was great.
At the 30s, that's what counts.
Yeah,
it's not about the quantity; it's about the quality.
No, definitely not. Exactly. And I knew it was a person who wasn't, just passing through, because that was the thing in the co-living. You have a lot of people who come say, "Oh, I'm here for 2 months." I'm not going to bother. I'm not. It's sad to say, but when you're in a city and you want to live there, and I had interviewed a expat woman who told me, I made the mistake the first few years of making friends with people who were only staying 1 year. You build so much, and then suddenly they're gone. The first question is, how long are you staying? If you're not staying 3 years, I don't want to hear about it.
The typical expat dilemma of like everyone leaving you and you're okay every 2 years doing new circle of
I
friends.
Have to start again.
Gosh. Yes.
Exactly. So yeah, but so finding the right people, finding people who are staying, and I've recently discovered an app, Garam, which it's sort of a meetup, but it's more of a high level meetup with activities like going to the opera, going to this cool restaurant or new bar and things like that, where anyone can host or you pay to be able to attend other things. And it's actually full of internationals and was built by 2 former expats. You say, well, it's hard to meet people and explore the city. And so this, I feel, is a good way to also meet new people, internationals, and discover the city. I wouldn't say that I've really made friends yet through it. Haven't been very active on it, but it's just finding those little things that are not necessarily like a super big focus, but once in a while of saying, well, I want to go out. I want to meet people, maybe once a month or once every 2 months. It just brings up brings something fresh and something new. Yeah.
With an activity behind, because if it's meetups for just drinking, we all know how it ends. No. So it's not the best places, actually. It's not meaningful connections are not really happening. So it's a French app, or it's do you know if it works in other places, or?
So they've opened up London and New York. Okay. Maybe Berlin, I'm not sure.
How is it called?
Carom. Carom.
Okay. Check it out. All the listeners can check it out if you are one of the cities that it's active.
It's a cool way to discover the secrets of the city also. And even myself living in Paris for quite a few years, there's things you discover of like new restaurants or even places or big events that happen. I think they probably have subscriptions to the opera or something, and so they give access to it. It's usually quite expensive activities. That's the only thing I would say. But then anyone can create their own activity, so you can choose and adjust and also level it out.
Need to check it out. You also said something that is also interesting, and it's that people changes, obviously, but cities also and environments also. Yeah. And you said that you found Paris a completely different Paris than the one that you left. What would you say that it's the biggest changes that you've seen in these late years of Paris, like now?
So I left in 2015 and I came back in 2021. Things that I've seen changes, I feel it's more international. I mean, walking around, I hear a lot more foreign languages, and they're not only tourists. They're definitely people who actually live in the city or passing by for a few months. So that has changed. Talking with expats also, that it's much easier to find a job. I mean, companies are hiring more internationals even if they don't speak French, which was definitely not the case when I left, or very, very rare. So there's been a shift on that side. And then more in terms of how the city is, it's a lot more, there's a lot more cycling lanes. There used to be already, but it's really, really multiplied. And it's so nice that now you can cycle throughout the whole city, cross from one end to the other in like 35 to 40 minutes outside all the time, barely come in collision with barely be on the same street as a car and things like that. So no, it's very enjoyable. I mean, it's a beautiful city. So when you get to be outside and see all the monuments, is quite nice. We're recording right now. It's still the Olympics in Paris, and there's just an incredible vibe to the city right now.
I was going to ask. I will destroy the whole evergreen of this episode. It doesn't really matter. But how is the Olympics going? Like,
it's amazing. Yeah. I mean, there's a full buzzing atmosphere where there's lots of tourists. Not that many cars, which is fantastic. I mean, it is August, and everyone's just happy. The whole city just feels like a party with all the fan zones and things where you can go out. And it's just the fact that Paris is like an open sky, open roof stadium right now, because most of the locations are in the monuments or within the city directly. I mean, I've been to the Beach Valley, which happens just right next to the Eiffel Tower, where they created a stadium outdoors facing the Eiffel Tower. Last night I went to Grand Palais, where they were doing taekwondo. And you come out of there in the evening, it's all lit up, and it's in this area where there's so many monuments, really. So you come out of the Grand Palais, obviously you see the Grand Palais, which is magnificent with its glass roof. It's all lit up. You turn around, you cross the Alexander III Bridge, the Golden Bridge, where they did the triathlon starts. And it's nighttime, so you actually see the flame from it that's in the hot air balloon, floating above the river from there, all lit up by night. You turn around, there's the Eiffel Tower behind you. Invalides is lit up on the other side. It's even living here, I feel like I'm rediscovering the city and it's all its monuments, because everything is just completely showcased and used during the events. So
it must be incredible.
It's, really nice. It's quite magical.
Can imagine. So
we'll see in 10 days after the Olympics if it still feels so magical. I'm not sure.
Mounting of the things, like I don't know. I grew up in a city that had Olympic Games in the 92, and some of the infrastructures that were created by the Olympics are quite abandoned. And here in Athens, even worse, like the Olympics.
Well, Athens, yes, was a big one. Well, the thing is, we didn't create that much here because in Grand Palais, so the structure is going to be removed. It was only adding seats inside. Eiffel Tower, same. It was just they added seats, but it's something they'll take down. At Concorde, same thing. They did stuff at Invalides, so same. There's one pool that was built.
Yeah, but it's,
I think,
in these ones, I think it was more like a mount thingy, which is good because you don't affect that much the city. And the whole part of the monument it's the really cool part. It's not that you are building a whole new complex for making things. It's that you're using your already existing monuments and doing things in front of them. I think the concept here, it is very, very good. Like in that sense. They nail it.
And so they got funds also to restore part of the monuments for this, which is good also, long term.
So, talking about Paris, are you planning? It's your last move. Never say never, I suppose, but...
Never say never. No, never say never, but right now I'm happy. I mean, I changed flat, refurbished. I feel good in it. I feel good in the neighborhood. I like my life here. Also, what I didn't say is I work for a fully remote company. Okay. We used to have offices, but now we don't. But we always could be remote. I've been there for 3.5 years, but meaning I've been able to go off as a digital nomad for a couple of months, and I have that option. And I think that just satisfies me enough. I feel tired in advance of saying I'm going to move my whole life and have to restart from scratch, making friends, deal admin, packing up everything, settling and finding a home, etc. The option of just going to check out a country for 2-3 months works perfectly for me right now.
Sounds familiar. I'm also remote working, so but I think having a base, it's interesting. At least, like, if you can do this, okay, I'm going for some time, but still the going home, no? At the end of it, it's always reconforting. Yeah. Maybe one last question before we close the episode. It's if you have any tip, or what would you say to someone who needs or wants to repatriate? What is the biggest tip that you will give right now to someone who needs to repatriate?
Treat it as an expatriation. Go in the same way, same mindset. You're moving again, you're changing homes, so don't expect everything to be the same. Just go in as if it was a completely new country with, brand new set of eyes of you're discovering everything. Because one, it'll make it exciting of rediscovering the city, rediscovering the home, and it will put you in the mindset of, I have to make new friends. I have to find, new habits. Maybe you're going to change a neighborhood, and that'll be a little bit like you've changed area. And, there's probably new cultural things also to do, new activities. So find that.
Nice. Very good tip, I think. I will apply it if I ever go back home.
Yeah.
If I ever go back home. That's also a good question. Well, thanks a lot. I think it was a very, very interesting episode. But before that, maybe like reminding that you also have a podcast that it's called Meet The Expat. Yeah. Is there anywhere else that people can find you? I think you have Instagram and you have a social account.
So yeah, I'm on Instagram. There is a blog that's not very active, but there is a blog if needed. But if you want to reach out to me, Instagram or email.
Okay. So it's Meet The Expat also in Instagram, no? It's the same branding.
Yes, exactly.
Of course, you will always find the handles in the description, the links and everything. So as always, but yeah, besides that, thanks a lot. It has been very nice to interview you and to do the other part. Great also. very, very nice to know your stories and experiences, and also like if anyone is going to repatriate soon, I'm pretty sure that they will take advantage and it will be useful for them. So thanks.
Lovely talking. Lovely to talk with you and share the experience for sure.
You've been listening to Expat Experts, the podcast that takes you around the world through the stories of those who've lived it. Subscribe now to YouTube and your favorite podcast platform, and stay tuned for more inspiring interviews.